Story 1. I want to know how the princes in the tower died. Edit. Everyone in the replies championing their answer is exactly why I chose Richard III. I don't actually care about the princes. I want all the theorists to shut up. Story 2. Alan Dulles. Any individual president, any corrupt businessman, even any center of an international pedophile ring or long-term war criminal like Henry Kissinger is relatively small potatoes compared to Dulles. He shaped the 20th century more than any other figure, all for the worse, in secret, in ways we are still deeply grappling with today and will not overcome without reckoning with how, why, and for whom we arrived at the world we live in. Story 3. An important Dark Age European king. Like Kenneth, Egbert, Pepin, Clovis, or Cerdic. We know tragically little about these key figures in history, far less than most Roman emperors and even Egyptian pharaohs. I want to know how much truth there is to their stories and how much was made up hundreds of years later to legitimize future kings. Story 4. The last person to finish sealing the tomb of Genghis Khan, or the person who put to death the last individual to seal the tomb, whoever was the last actually living human involved in the burial of Genghis Khan, I would like to put them under cross-examination to find out where the tomb is. Imagine the historical value of that find. Story 5. Not Hitler, for sure. That moron ran his mouth all day and had a homebrew genocide philosophy. There is nothing to glean from that conversation at all. He would just rant at you. But Stalin, on the other hand, that was a man I would love to interrogate. I always wondered if he personally believed any of the Bolshevik agenda at all, or if it was all pure power politics. Story 6. Michael Jackson, simply to see what actually happened, as I tend to lean toward a lot of the accusations being pretty inflated or money grabs. But it is something I do not think we will ever know for sure. Story 7. Caleb Hughes murdered 5-year-old Melissa Brannon back in the 1980s, but police couldn't prove it. However, they could prove that he abducted her, and her body has never been found. So he was sentenced to 50 years in jail. Fairly recently, he got out after 29 years, but they just sent him back for violating the conditions of his parole by having contact with children. He needs to admit what he did and never leave prison. Story 8. I always wanted to speak to Einstein. I never liked or understood physics and his theories, but I just wanted to talk to him about life, his hobbies, or his philosophy of life. Just what his day is like. Story 9. My ex-girlfriend Marla. 13 people eventually told me what really happened, but they were all lying according to Marla. Pain and suffering. I would sue her for $1 because I just want to see the truth come out of her face. After that, maybe I would like to ask Captain Kidd where he buried the stuff on Oak Island, and then ask B. Cooper where he has been all these years. Story 10. File a class action against the people who burned the Library of Alexandria. I saw a post that said all of recorded human history is actually an encapsulation of 0.7% of human history. That's a lot to not know. Story 11. Prophet Muhammad. He needs to tell us if he really heard voices from the angel Gabriel or if he just made them up using the Old Testament, Torah, and Sabaean legends. Also, for issues related to rape, war, and underage marriage with his 6-year-old wife. Story 12. Anything from the past might be interesting, but if you were doing this not just out of curiosity but in order to improve the state of the world through the discovery process of litigation, you should pick someone contemporary. Someone who can tell you about what is going on right now. Ideally, a person with many connections and influence in finance or politics. Sure, Epstein might be interesting, and through him you can find out who's a pervert, but that might be all. Pick someone who handles the world's money, then find the perverts by their money connections to Epstein, and you get to ask the truly uncomfortable questions about corporate crime, about financial connections, about who's paying off whom, about how members of Congress are somehow genius investors who outperform the Standard and Poor's 500 by orders of magnitude. And since that person can't lie, their answers can't really be ignored or hand-waved away. Maybe then there is a chance at changing the world for the better. Story 13. Putin. I think getting the truth in everything that Russia is doing at the moment and bringing it to an end would probably do the greatest good to the world at the moment. Story 14. Ronald Reagan. Please address your role in trickle-down economics, the AIDS crisis, and other areas where your charismatic leadership was evident. Additionally, both Bill and Hillary Clinton, please participate in this discussion in a couples therapy setting. Story 15. Epstein would be the first logical choice as far as recent history goes. If I had a free option to go along with that, then Trump, of course, Epstein would have a lot of information on Trump already. With some 30,000 recorded falsehoods during his presidency alone, just imagine what he would have to reveal about all his other criminal activities. My bet is that literally everything about his life is nothing but absolute falsehoods. I'd also bet he would accumulate about a dozen life sentences worth of crimes. Story 16. Probably one of the Saudi princes. I bet they have dirt on everybody. There's a reason why there aren't many public figures who even mention their existence, and it's definitely not because they can have you killed or kidnapped within a day or two anywhere in the world. Story 17. Leo Frank, the American Dreyfus. Every once in a while, anti-Semites will bring up his case again and try to argue that he really was guilty despite historians accepting that he was innocent. I'd love to shut them up. Story 18. I would want to question someone like Christopher Columbus. I think it would be fascinating to hear his true intentions and thoughts about his explorations. Could shed light on a lot of history we've learned. Story 19. I'd bring the person who invented the pause button on television remotes. Just imagine the confession. Yes, I did it to ruin family bonding moments during commercials. You're welcome. Story 20. Since most of the obvious choices have already been posted, I will add Robert Wagner. I want to know what happened on that boat. Or Jack the Ripper to get his identity and motivations. Story 21. Jesus or Muhammad? There is an incredible number of questions I would like to ask either of them. The original question didn't say I had to successfully persuade them. Story 22. Robert S. McNamara. Not even that he did anything wrong. There's just so many unanswered questions that he has the answers to, like a lifetime of conspiracies. Story 23. If they couldn't lie, then I think we could all benefit from Michael Jackson's testimony. For the better or for the worse, we'd finally get some closure on that debate. Story 24. I am sure I could find something better, but what comes to mind would be Donald Trump being prosecuted for systematically ripping off small businesses by having them construct his buildings and then not paying them or offering tiny portions of what was contracted. It would be good to see those people finally get paid and for him to finally, truthfully show his contempt in public. Story 25. I'd go for something current or semi-current as those things would affect our societies. An obvious choice has to be Donald Trump, about everything from his real estate days to current events. Then Richard Cheney about the Iraq invasion. Story 26. Since it can be any kind of court for any reason, why limit ourselves to a criminal court hearing? Since the Senate can also be a court, why not have a hearing with, say, the top person at the National Security Agency for violating parts of the Constitution? The amount of dirt they've got and espionage they've done is second to none. Story 27. I know he's no longer hiding anything but Hitler. I want him to face justice instead of taking the easy way out like he did. God, I wish the ending of Inglourious Bastard was real. Story 28. I would bring to court someone who could shed light on important historical events, such as a famous political leader, to find out the truth about their motives and actions. This shows an interest in history and a desire to understand the causes of important events. Story 29. Hitler. Mussolini would be a close second. He got what he deserved in the end, though, being shot, then hung upside down in the town square from a meat hook. Story 30. If he couldn't lie, we'd have his own word that he either was or wasn't the Son of God. I'd prosecute him for something small, like mischief for turning over the tables at the temple. The prosecution isn't the point. Story 31. I know it's boring, but I would be really interested in Donald Trump being forced to tell the truth. Is that even physically possible? Would he just sit there with his mouth open, unable to speak a word? It would be fascinating to see how truth magic works on someone who lies like he breathes. Story 32. Ronald Reagan, the architect of just about all the political mess the United States is now in. The guy who made deals with terrorists to undermine elections. The guy who destabilized entire continents. The guy who created the failed war on drugs. The guy who set the standard for lying while in office. The guy who doubled down on fossil fuels and turned the country away from renewable energy. The guy who set the model for deficit spending. The guy who set a standard for letting corporations get away with everything and cutting taxes on the rich, creating the greatest wealth disparity the world has ever seen. Story 33. Absolutely physically impossible for them to lie. Donald Trump. Mr. Trump, why did you decide to run as a Republican? Because those people are tremendous idiots, Your Honor. Story 34. I would love to prosecute Hillary Clinton and watch her try to squirm out of her responsibility for what happened at Benghazi. In an age where we can indict a ham sandwich for something, she has more Teflon surrounding her than the so-called Teflon Don John Gotti ever did. Story 35. I'd bring the person who invented the easy button. I want to know what their life is like when nothing ever feels easy, and see if they can manage to push their own button. It might just spark some serious existential questions in court. Story 36. It's in Gulliver's Travels. When he visits the island of Glubdubdrib, the governor and his family are served and attended by domestics of a kind somewhat unusual. By his skill in necromancy, he has a power of calling whom he pleases from the dead and commanding their service for 24 hours, but no longer, nor can he call the same persons up again in less than 3 months, except upon very extraordinary occasions. For His Highness, the governor ordered me to call up whatever persons I would choose to name, and in whatever numbers among all the dead from the beginning of the world to the present time, and command them to answer any questions I should think fit to ask, with this condition, that my questions must be confined within the compass of the times they lived in. And one thing I might depend upon, that they would certainly tell me the truth, for lying was a talent of no use in the lower world. I desired to see Alexander the Great at the head of his army, just after the Battle of Arbela, which, upon a motion of the governor's finger, immediately appeared in a large field under the window where we stood. Alexander was called up into the room. It was with great difficulty that I understood his Greek and had but little of my own. He assured me upon his honor that he was not poisoned, but died of a bad fever by excessive drinking. Next, I saw Hannibal passing the Alps, who told me he had not a drop of vinegar in his camp. I saw Caesar and Pompey at the head of their troops, just ready to engage. I saw the former in his last great triumph. I desired that the Senate of Rome might appear before me, in one large chamber, and an assembly of somewhat a later age in counterview in another. The first seemed to be an assembly of heroes and demigods. The other a knot of peddlers, pickpockets, highwaymen, and bullies. The governor, at my request, gave the sign for Caesar and Brutus to advance towards us. I was struck with a profound veneration at the sight of Brutus and could easily discover the most consummate virtue, the greatest intrepidity and firmness of mind, the truest love of his country, and general benevolence for mankind, in every lineament of his countenance. I observed, with much pleasure, that these two persons were in good intelligence with each other, and Caesar freely confessed to me that the greatest actions of his own life were not equal, by many degrees, to the glory of taking it away. I had the honor to have much conversation with Brutus and was told that his ancestor Junius, Socrates, Epaminondas, Cato the Younger, Sir Thomas More, and himself were perpetually together, a sextumvirate to which all the ages of the world cannot add a seventh. Story 37. We don't really know if they had a leader in the modern sense, so it might be hard to choose one particular person, but I just want to know who the damn sea people were. Story 38. Every billionaire and overinflated salary chief executive officer and chief financial officer responsible for wage theft. I want to hear why they think it is okay to do that to people. What do they really need a salary of $2 million for? What do they actually do all day? Story 39. Casey Anthony, the woman who didn't report her daughter missing for a month, and whose grandmother ended up filing a missing persons report, lied to the police multiple times. They found her daughter's dead body in the woods. Everybody knows she did it, but she was never charged with it. Story 40. Man, that's a tough one. I would probably go with Hitler, you know? My grandpa fought in the war, and the stories he told me, they stick with you. I remember him tearing up, talking about liberating those camps. Seeing that Nazi bastard squirm in court, unable to lie his way out of it, that would be something. Probably wouldn't change anything, but it would feel like some justice, at least. Story 41. Is there also a condition that the truths they tell will be acknowledged as such by all humans? If so, I want to go back to the very first iteration of L. Ron Hubbard, the first person to roll out the concept of religion. Imagine human history without all the religious wars or wars fought under the pretext of religion. We might possibly have current Mayan, Aztec, Olmec, Amazonian, Egyptian, native North American tribes, and all the culture and understanding that could have flourished with all those groups still present in far greater numbers. Imagine the questions that would be answered if those things had not happened. I understand we can't go back and know all those things we've lost and missed, but just imagine if we all could know without any doubts what religions, if any, are true to their claims. I am aware human nature would have divided us along some other tribal line, but what if those lines were based on tangible issues? Maybe it sorts out similarly. Maybe it doesn't. My response may be naive, but it is no more naive than the original poster's question. And before the replies stack up about me having a problem with religion or gods, it's not the pinnacle of the pyramid I despise. It's the bad actors and wolves among the sheep that prey on those that do not possess the faculties to see through when they are being scammed. If there is any God, I can't imagine one that truly would want his servants to eliminate all the humans that don't subscribe to their doctrine. It just doesn't make any sense to me at all.